to another dimension, a dimension of insight, a dimension of understanding. You are entering a place where reality collides with truth. There are no limits, there are no boundaries. This is OffPlanet Radio.
Welcome to OffPlanet Radio Live. Almost on time. Somebody asked me in the chat room, are we on time tonight? Well, relatively speaking, we are. We're about 4 minutes after the hour here. Wherever you are in whatever time zone, it's that time of the week. It's time for OffPlanet Radio Live. And are you feeling anxious, angry, upset, maybe a little depressed? Do you feel like you got people walking around in your head? Oh, well, no, I'm not talking about alien abduction. What I'm talking about is Facebook. This article hit my eyes today. I had to share this. This comes from infopackets.com, which is an IT website. And they put out a daily digest of interesting articles. Researchers at the University of Michigan studied 82 Facebook users with an average age of 19 to 20. The researchers started by asking the subjects a series of questions to check their levels of self-esteem and or depression. Oh, God, self-esteem. They then sent the subjects a text message 5 times each day over a 2-week period. The message linked to a survey that asked the subjects whether they felt positive or negative, how worried they felt, how lonely they felt, how much they had used Facebook in recent days, and how much time they had spent in real-world interactions with other people since the last survey. At the end of this 2-week period, the researchers repeated these questions. And according to the research, it says whenever people had recently used Facebook, they were statistically more likely to feel negative. They also found the more the person had used Facebook during the 2 weeks, the more their overall sense of well-being declined during the study. Although the researchers explored whether the process might work in reverse, meaning that people who were already feeling worried or lonely might be more likely to use Facebook, the results were inconclusive. The researchers also noted that having real-world interactions with other people was more likely to increase positive feelings. It also notes that it is possible that people with mental illness gravitate towards Facebook, but that Facebook does not make people have negative feelings. Oh, isn't that interesting? People with mental illness gravitate towards Facebook. I'm not busting on Facebook. They're not alone. There's a bunch of Twitter addicts out there and people who hang out on internet forums to their ongoing decay of mental health. Back in the 1930s, the Tavistock Institute began research projects into the use of electronic media for controlling the moods and the outlooks of the population of the world. Tavistock, if you don't know who that is, are the people who would later give us the pop culture of the 1960s, LSD, the Beatles, the revolutions that you thought you were in the streets fomenting. No. The Tavistock Institute had they had an agenda, and it basically had to do with using media, radio, television, now internet, as a form of hypnosis and mind control. Quoting the Tavistock, documents, they say our mode calls for emotional stimulus, increased use of amplifiers. They're talking here about emotional amplifiers, which induce self-indulgence, whether direct television programs or advertising. We at Tavistock have found the best way to accomplish the goal is through an unremitting and unrelenting emotional affrontation and attack, parentheses, mental rape, through a constant barrage of sex, violence, war, racial strife, both in the electronic and print media. This steady diet could be called mental junk food. We're in the digital age now. The Tavistock Institute helped pioneer social networking. Go look at the history of Mark Zuckerberg. Don't look at the movie that they made about this, which was pop culture dribble. Look at the background of Facebook and understand that guys in college dorms don't write code for a multi-billion-dollar social networking experiment. So if you're feeling like crap, get the hell off Facebook. What are you doing? Get a life. Go talk to somebody. Go out and walk outside and look at the beautiful earth and get your face out of the electronic environment for a while. It may be a great tool. It's also a way that they're controlling us. Okay, that's my rant for tonight. Great show lined up tonight. We bring people on here sometimes that are not world famous, that are not on George Norrie's Coast to Coast, that will not be interviewed by Project Camelot. And we're actually proud of that because we're the little guys. We're the guys that are actually out here doing this in the real world with pretty much nothing to gain at this point. And to that end, I want to bring up my guest host who also is pretty much doing this for nothing these days. Chris Hawley, good evening.
Good evening, and that was a wonderful rant. And I could not agree with it. You know how I feel.
I know how you feel. I knew you'd love this.
And it's getting to the point with my own family, I have to go on Facebook to figure out what's going on with them because it becomes so, I don't know, sucked into this void of internetness. And they won't just call me up or, like, meet me for lunch. So it's an incredible thing, and you're right.
Chris, this article...
Get a life. Get out there.
This article that I was reading from says, one of Tavistock's primary other operating structures is to keep all groups so occupied with endless rounds of issues and problems that they have no time to think clearly. And here we rely on entertainment, which should not reach beyond the mental capacity of a child in the 6th grade.
Oh, my gosh. And I am a child of the 60s.
Yes.
Because I was born in the early 50s. And I was not aware that we were being programmed from that point on. But I will tell you, I'm a rebel. I've been a rebel since I'm a little kid. I spent a great amount of time in my teen years standing back and watching my friends do, like, sheep-like maneuvers in their dress and what they liked to listen to for music, and I knew they were just following some kind of crowd. Social engineering. But very old plan. Absolutely. Now I do realize it was all being fed to them, to us, and we did it. I didn't. I actually didn't like I hated some of the music at the time. I was never a Beatles fan. Don't everybody jump on me. I wasn't.
Oops, sorry. I played Helter Skelter coming in on the show tonight.
But, that's just the way it was. So that's very interesting. Tonight, I am so excited to be talking to this man because in my mind, he's my Billy Idol. We have Billy Booth of UFO Casebook, which is without question the absolute best site, best place for information, best UFO information place to be on the internet, and has been since January 2000, which is the last 13 years. So if you really want to know what's been happening, what was happening, what once did happen, and where do you think maybe we're going with all this stuff that is under the topic of UFOs, Billy Booth would be probably the one to ask. However, Billy is not a aggressive type person, So he hasn't been doing a lot of interviews and doing a lot of things like that. He just has been working on the most beautiful, magnificent, absolutely packed with information UFO site that I've ever seen. So tonight, let me say hello to and welcome our wonderful UFO Casebook guest, Billy Booth. Hi, Billy.
Hi, guys. It's a real pleasure to be on your show.
It's good to have you here tonight, Billy, and your accent's marvelous. You're coming to us from deep in the heart of Texas tonight, where it's actually cool.
Yeah, it's just about 91 or 2. I know that.
That's a virtual springtime down there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is. Or early fall. It has been unseasonably cool this summer. You know, like last year we had every day in August reached 100 or more. And this year we just had 13 days that reached 100 in August. That's a big improvement.
Wow. That's gonna make the global warming people absolutely cry. Billy, you have an amazing website. It is a resource that has been on the internet for over 13 years now, going on 14 years. And let's talk a little bit about you, your journey, how you came to be doing UFO casebooks, and what you believe about UFOs. Well,
I was born back in 48, so I was a young boy through the 50s. And by that time, most people had bought a TV at home. You know, the first one I saw was probably in about 1954, and that was through a window down at Sears and Roebuck department store. And my dad, Mom kept pushing Dad, so we need to get a TV, we need to get a TV. And we can't afford one. Well, finally one day he said, Billy, jump in my truck, we're going to go down and buy a TV. So we did, and it was a little 13-inch Motorola, I remember it well. Well, I found out a day or two later the reason he bought it was to watch all the football bowl games that was coming on January the 1st. But anyway, we had a TV. Well, you know, during that era, there was a lot of sci-fi on TV. You know, weekly series, Outer Limits, One Step Beyond, Twilight Zone, mid to middle 60s, you know, and I got real interested in those. I remember even Disney World had a Future World or something like that, you know, about space exploration and so forth. And then along came all the movies, you know, Day the Earth Stood Still, Earth versus the Flying Saucers, The Men from Mars, and all these things, which by today's standards is pretty low tech, but still, you know, they were very popular, and almost everybody on our block would dig down and make a shelter, and it was for two reasons. One was if we were invaded by UFOs, and secondly, if Russia dropped a bomb on us. So it served a dual purpose, you understand. But that was the common thought or theme that ran through normal, everyday people back in the 50s up to about the mid-60s and so forth. And that's why I got so interested in those type of things. And I remember one day in our local newspaper, I saw an article. It said, couple abducted by UFO in New Hampshire. Oh, boy, that really got me going. Of course, they were referring to the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, 61.
Yeah.
That's the first time I'd ever seen anything in print about a UFO. So that got me real interested in the subject, and I'd occasionally pick up a book or a magazine about it. And ever since then, I've been interested in them and still am. Now, there was a lot of years when I worked a lot of hours doing other things and didn't really have time to do any research or accumulate any type of data or anything like that until I semi-retired in about 2000. And then from there, I, started the casebook, and it was pretty small then, and we've just kind of grown along as time's gone by to reach where we are today.
Now, back in the time when you were growing up, which somewhat overlaps my and Chris' youth as well, the subject of flying saucers and aliens didn't quite have the seriousness that I think it's taken on in, I'd say, the last 20 years. But what were the attitudes then? I remember as a kid, a little kid, looking at newspaper tabloids in the grocery store and seeing these really silly pictures of, like, I guess what we now know as grays or something like that. But it was a joke, and it was treated like a joke. Was that the attitude that you grew up around, or did people take this more seriously?
In the South, it was taken pretty seriously. It really was. Now, yeah, there was the tabloids and all that, and I think that most people looked at those just for about what they were, really, and they really didn't give those much thought. They knew it was kind of a combination of sci-fi and comic books and that sort of thing, and primarily just to sell copies of whatever it was. But people really did have a fear of an alien invasion. It was a very common thing, like I said before. People, I remember my parents having friends come over at night, and, quite often the conversation would go to something like that. Did you see that Outer Limits the other night where the aliens came in? And that they consider it a genuine, serious threat. And all the men would get together at one house and build a shelter, and then after they finished that, they'd all go to another friend's, build a shelter, and it was a very looked at very seriously during that time.
Wow, that's very interesting. I have to say that you're the only other person, Billy, that has this to say. I keep saying that where I grew up here on Long Island, which was very country at the time, the people that I grew up with also took it for granted that there were UFOs and aliens and sightings all the time, and it was normal to them, and they didn't have the today's skeptic where they you have these very nasty debunkers and that get angry at you that you think this thing. It was more a realization that of course it must be. We can't be the only ones here. And so many of my neighbors are seeing things. Something must be there. How about you, Randy, when you grew up? What was it in your neck of the woods?
Well, I'll say this, that from the 1960s through to the mid-1970s, there were numerous UFO flaps here in southern central Pennsylvania, and even known UFO flaps occurring over Baltimore and Washington, D.C., in that same period. We don't live all that far away from major military installations here. I mean, Virginia, Maryland, the CIA, all of these spook organizations are camped out, within a few hundred miles of us here. But generally, overall, I never perceived that it was taken seriously the way you and Billy just described it. I thought it was dismissed as being something silly and ridiculous and sci-fi, and people were mocked for it. I entered a science fair project in 9th grade where I was they weren't even sure if they'd let me have the exhibit that I had made in the science fair, because they said it wasn't science, it was on UFOs, and it was actually based on disinformation anyway. It was based on Project Blue Book. So my atmosphere of growing up for me in that period of time was this was not a tolerant atmosphere for acceptance of anything like that.
That's very interesting to me. Well, that hit where I lived in the late 70s to the beginning of the early 80s. People started that skeptical, snideness. But before that, it was matter of fact. And that would be very interesting to ask people all over the country if it was, how was it taken in there where they lived, and did it ever change? But, Billy, I know when we were talking before, I asked you if you ever had your own UFO sighting, and you told me that you had not. But you did have a situation that you started to tell me about. Would you continue with that?
Sure. This was in, I believe, 1964 or 5. I was a young, long-haired teenage boy playing Beatles music, by the way, in a music group. And there was this, there's Fort Hood over in Killeen, a large Army base, and across the street from it, there was another base called Gray Air Force Base. Now, Fort Hood was open. You could go through the guard gate and say, I'm going to go do this or that. Yeah, you could go on in. Nobody followed you or anything like that. Well, Gray Air Force Base had a reputation at that time very similar to, I told you, a small Area 51. Of course, you hear things, and, there was no way to verify anything, but the stories were pretty rampant about, they've got nuclear weapons over there and probably UFOs. So anyway, we had a manager, our drummer's father. He was a pretty well-known businessman in Killeen, Central Texas area. And he got us a New Year's Eve gig out there at the base. And so we headed out there that night, and we were told that you'd have to go through the guard gate to get in there, but they knew we were coming and so forth. So we went out there. It was 4 different cars, we bringing the drums and the amps and all that stuff. And so we pulled up to the front gate, and our manager got out. And I saw over on the right side 2 Jeeps sitting there. And each one of them had a mounted machine gun on top of it. And there was a guy standing there, manning it, plus the driver. And he had, there was another couple of soldiers here and there around. So we pulled up, and the guard gave instructions to our manager, to go on in, and that the first Jeep would lead us in. The second Jeep would follow our last vehicle, go behind us, and we went into the place, and they went outside, and they stood guard, armed at the door, while we took all of our stuff in. And we were told, here's the stage, and here's your dressing rooms, and so forth, for your breaks and everything. Do not go anywhere else, or you will be arrested. Well, we didn't, of course. We were just young boys and scared. That was quite an experience. And then when it was all over with, we followed the first Jeep back out to the guardhouse and back out on East 190, and the last one followed us behind with those machine guns mounted. That's the first and only time that I ever went to Gray Air Force Base. Of course, we all began to believe that those rumors were true.
Well, obviously they were protecting and hiding something.
Something.
Yeah, no question about it.
He was talking about Pennsylvania. Of course, it has been really among the, had a large percentage, one of the most states with some of the most sighting reports of all of the states. Of course, 65 was when Kecksburg occurred,
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And there was, if you look through 65, you'll see there's the Cherry Creek, New York landing up there. The photographs were taken in Tulsa, the landing at Pretoria, South Africa, the Exeter, New Hampshire ones. Now, that was a book, too, written by John G. Fuller, that also wrote the Betty and Barney Hill story called The Interrupted Journey. That's one of UFO's still best cases ever. That was in 65. Edwards Air Force Base was in 65. The first Gemini 7 report was in 65. The USS Tyru encounter was in 66. The Tully saucer nest in Australia, you know, where they found that embedded landing pad in a swamp over there, and the famous Michigan swamp gas case in 66. You know, it just goes on and on. And then, of course, there was the Washington, D.C. sightings over the Capitol Day in 64, I believe. So, I mean, that was a very, very active decade there, the 60s were.
Oh, definitely. That's when I had a major UFO incident in my life.
Was it?
1965,
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And,
was that in Long Island, or?
That was in Long Island on the South Shore, right on the shoreline there of the Atlantic Ocean, and it was ongoing. It was somebody saw something almost, I would say, weekly at that time, flying over.
Is that right?
It was terrible. Yeah.
Was this
Billy,
like? You know, a lot of people saw it, mass, you know, multi-witnesses and so forth.
Yes. In my incident alone, most of the town saw it, but only a few of the teenagers were actually taken and involved in the incident. But yeah, there was. Billy, in the last 13 years, of course, it's grown in on the internet as just being available to people to come and, you know, to give reports. But do you feel that the actual activity of UFOs around the country and around the world are increasing, staying the same, decreasing? Do you think it comes in waves?
Yeah,
what have you...
There's your answer, really. It's waves. And you have to remember the difference in media 20 years ago and today. Look at how easy it is now for someone to go on the internet, whether it's a blog or a forum or whatever, and post a report. Where before, you know, what were you going to do? Call the Air Force or a military base and tell them what you saw? You know, and usually that was disregarded, or they came up with some seemingly reasonable explanation for it. And how could you communicate it to the masses? You couldn't. So a whole lot larger percentage of sightings or actually make it to the internet to where they can be seen by people than there were 20 years ago or even 15 years ago. The reporting of them is there's so many of them. You know, you just scan through every day. There's 6, 8, or 10 or so forth. Of course, you know, I'm the first one to admit that the majority of them, 80, 90%, probably if you knew all of the facts and the location and the time, so forth, probably could be explained away as something conventional. But not all of them, though. And those are the ones that, you know, we're concerned with and try to dig into a little deeper when the information is available. But it's the ease of reporting today and the fast communication that makes the cases seem like there's so many more. And whereas before, such a small percentage of them got reported to where anyone more than just, say, a small group of people or a family or a guy and his friend, you know, saw it and tried to tell somebody about it, and they got laughed off. Well, you know, there was no place to report it. You know, Blue Book, they only, you know, took the major ones and they had, and they didn't investigate, but a small percentage of what they had.
Yes, that's true. Since 2012, where we all had the big, you know, build up to 2012, And a lot of bad things have happened on the Earth, and the sun is acting badly, and we're having a lot of confusion and strange weather and natural disasters and terrible storms. It's true. But since 2012 up to where we are now in 2013, have you seen any change in the reportings in either quantity or quality or types of things that are being reported?
Well, I would, this is just a guess, really. I don't have any hard statistics, but I think that the number of sightings probably has increased some, and there's no doubt that the quality of the reports are better now.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think you are getting more actual material given to you? Because we both know that in what you do and what I do, you get a lot of fake things sent to you, a lot of false stories told to you, and it's just people looking for things. Do you think that is
some of them,
Yeah.
Well, here's something, that you might know, or you may not, I don't know, but, we look at the MUFON sightings every day. They have a list that's open to the public there, and every time they keep, I think, 20 or 25, I don't know. But when a new one comes on, it goes at the top, and the one on the bottom drops off. Well, and people will look through there every day. A lot of people with UFO sites will try to, find one that seems really interesting to post or something like that, especially one with a video or a photograph. But something a lot of people don't know, I know some people in MUFON and several state directors and so forth, not every sighting that's sent into MUFON makes that list. First, they're viewed and sent to the respective state director. And if he sees one that he thinks is something he wants to look into, it won't make that list. And sometimes I have a friend or two that sends it to me, not right then. It may be a month, 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. Then after they've gone over it and kind of satisfied themselves, they'll send it to me and I'll post it. But you'll never see it on the day or next day that it happened, because they take those out.
That's very interesting. I don't know what to say to that, because MUFON's had so many ups and downs over the past, few years.
Mostly downs, I realize that. But there are some real good folk, very dedicated people that work for or in MUFON. I know they really are. I mean, they're ardent researchers.
Yeah, and we have a few of them that come on this show, too.
That are wonderful.
Ken Pfeiffer from New Jersey MUFON, he's going to be coming back in the fall.
Pfeiffer is, I'll say this, I normally don't comment on my personal opinion, but he is one of the best.
Yeah.
Pfeiffer is. I guarantee
what we think too.
He is dedicated, man. I talked to him in the email just a little bit ago before I came on the show. He's just a great fellow and dedicated to what he does, and he believes in what he does.
Yeah, he is a wonderful man, and really the type of people that we need running the UFO reporting sites and doing a professional job about it. He is, I have nothing but good things to say about Ken. I run a lot of his stuff. He gives me stuff. I put it up on my site all the time, trying to get people, educated. Billy, what do you think the UFOs are? Who do you think is behind them? Do you think it's many, many different things? And if so, tell us your feelings about the whole subject.
Well, when you get past the travel restrictions from planet to planet, You think about the speed involved and the great distance in light years and so forth. That has always kind of been a stickler with me. You know, I'm thinking, now, wait a minute. Now, let's be honest here. Did they travel 1,000 years to get here? They did. How did they live like that? How are they still alive? But I've come to the conclusion, this is just my own opinion, based on what I've seen and heard, that they have some way, I believe, that some of the UFO sightings are of extraterrestrial origin that come from another world. I also believe that some of them come from another dimension. Now, the reason I say that is not just theoretically speaking, but there's been a lot of reports, even videos taken, and photographs where an object is clearly seen in one part of the sky, maybe by multiple witnesses. They're videotaping it. Suddenly it's gone. It's just not there anymore. And then, maybe a minute or two later, it's visible again in another part of the sky. Now, if you go back to, it's very controversial, I realize, the Billy Meyer photographs. Did you know that when his material, photos and videos, became well known and a lot of researchers started going to him, he gave them some photographs and video right out of his off the spool. Of course, he used the 8mm film, motion picture. They sent them to Kodak in Tokyo, and they put their best people on it, and they said they could find, all the film was continuous. There was no breaks, no splicing, and that all of them were true images of something in the sky. Now, there was a short period of time where there used to be a old VHS tape you could rent in the movie stores before, DVDs came along and so forth, called The Beam Ships. He had a series of film that he took. I can't find those anywhere, by the way, but anyway. And there were several extremely clear video films of a metallic craft in the air. There was dimension too. There was some trees, a hill. It wasn't just a light in the sky, Yeah. And that they would be there, and then in a minute, that's gone. Then 30 seconds later or a minute, and the other part of the left side of the screen, pop, it came back again. Now, those films were found to not have been tampered with, unless that, he was not what you would call a high-tech guy or highly educated fella. He used what he had, and at that time, it was just everyday stuff. He had cameras and his 8mm films. Of course, he just had one arm, He did a little innovation to fix it to where he could had something to stand it on and hold it, and use his good arm to do the actual filming with. But those beam ship photos, along with other more recent evidence, has made me believe that there is a good chance that some of these things come from another dimension. Now, I know a lot of people won't believe that, And I hadn't gone off the deep end. I'm just an everyday old country boy. But I'm only going by what I've seen and heard people report. It was
Billy, join the club, because most of the people in the UFO community now believe that right along with you. They agree with that. Yes, absolutely. Now, talking about what we're talking about, your photo section on your UFO Casebook site, which, by the way, just go to www.ufocasebook.com or just do a search on UFO Casebook to get to his site, and you'll be taken right there. But the photo area was fascinating to me because you show photos taken starting in the mid-1800s?
1870s, I believe.
1870s, which is, not only why would someone fake something like that because it wasn't popular or known, but how would they fake something like that at that time?
Tell us
a little bit about that.
Well, back then, the cameras and so forth were so simple that they just simply imprinted on film what the eye of the lens saw. And to be able to manipulate film and so forth, or a picture, fake it or hoax it, would have been very, very difficult. And I don't think that only the most highly educated and experts in photography could have done something like that. But most all of those are taken by just everyday people like you and I.
What was said at the time that they were taken? Do you have any idea how the people in the 1870s, how they digested and understood what they were looking at when they looked at the pictures or saw them?
They were just mystified, because remember, it was early 1900s before we ever got a plane off the ground. And that was just for, 30 seconds or something like that, right, brothers? So nothing flew back then. And when you saw something up in the sky, that was a big thing, because you think, where did that come from? We don't have anything that does that. It was really something unusual.
What was the best one of that era, do you think, that you've seen?
Well, I think that you're talking about the early ones.
The real early ones.
50s and yeah. Well, of course we had the ones in that were taken by Trent. His photographs were extremely good. They still come under scrutiny today, but a lot of people said they were faked or so forth. But I don't see any indication of it myself. Yeah, he just had a plain old camera, and that's about it. And that was one of the best. It was the one in 1870. That stereo image that was taken was very good too.
Yes, it was. Were there any stories of any kind of close encounters with these things from those days, or were they just?
Well, no. It started in the late 1800s, during the era of the what they call the Great Airship era.
Yeah.
Where people began to, see. At that time, they were more like, I think, dirigibles and things like that,
Yeah.
But yeah, there are accounts. I've even got some old verbatim newspaper accounts of that time, to where there are cases where, a farmer or somebody like that outside saw a craft land and was approached by, beings and so forth like that. Of course, you have to remember that it's like we talked before, those type of reports sometimes were like picked up by a local newspaper or something, and that's about as far as they went. there was no national reporting base. And some people that really dug into the old cases, gone back in time, have found the accounts in old newspapers and stuff. Of course, 1897 was when the alleged crash at Aurora, Texas happened,
Yeah.
Not the little alien and so forth.
Hey guys, are we ready? Do you want to take a break here at this point?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, good. We're doing a 90-minute show tonight, and we're going to take a break at this point and come back on the other side with our guest, Billy Booth. UFOCasebook.com is the website, and we'll be back in about 7 minutes. Stand by. This is OffPlanet Radio. I'm Randy Maugans with Chris Hawley and our guest, Billy Booth.
This is OffPlanet Radio.
To another dimension, a dimension of insight, a dimension of understanding. You are entering a place where reality collides with truth. There are no limits, there are no boundaries. This is OffPlanet Radio.
And we welcome you back to hour number 2 of OffPlanet Radio Live. It is August 21st, 2013, under the light of the silvery moon tonight. It is, it's still technically full moon. And that's always an interesting time because all kinds of things seem to swim around the energies coming from the moon. We are definitely into an interesting conversation tonight with my guest and Chris Hawley's guest as well. Chris has been busy helping to produce the show and book guests, and really the last 2 weeks she's carried these interviews a lot. We're really kind of into her forte. I want to remind you that next week we will have on the air with us live Tom Carey and Don Schmidt inside the Real Area 51, the secret history of Wright-Patterson. We're going to talk about what goes on in Building 18 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, and the history that connects it to the Roswell crash and all of the strange things that intersect military and ufology. And with that, I welcome back on the line Chris Hawley and our guest, Billy Booth. Welcome back, guys. And Chris, I know you still have a lot of things you want to talk about, so let's go ahead and go back into it.
All right. The thing I wanted to talk about tonight, so let's get it over with, is I read Ken Pfeiffer is a wonderful guy, and he sent me a report tonight. And I read it, and I thought, well, now this is interesting. It's not that I haven't heard it before, but it was a really clear report. It was just recently, a few days ago, I think it was, so it's a very fresh new report. It took place in Oregon, where a bunch of men were ending, I think, a business meeting or something, and they were standing outside, and they saw this very strange craft. And they said that it was translucent, or, transparent, yet they could see the borders of it. And it had coming from the bottom of it what looks like heat from a paved road in the hot summer, which I'm sure in Texas you've seen. Billy,
yes, I have.
Right, and this is coming out. Right, this has been coming out of the bottom of this thing, and it would. I think they saw it for a few seconds, and then it either disappeared or moved away where they couldn't see it anymore. And immediately afterwards, they saw 2 fighter jets coming and going in the direction, or, going, I guess, after this thing. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Here's yet another type of UFO. And although they saw the outline of the ship, they said they could see through it and see the sky on the other side. This took place in broad daylight. Right. Now, I thought, this is interesting. I've heard others similar to it, and this is another craft. Now, over the years, it's almost like the new car model coming out every year, as far as the different crafts. We started with the saucer-type ones, and then we had the cigar-shaped craft, and we've had the triangular shapes, and we've had the rectangle, which is really odd, the rectangle or building-sized crafts, and then, of course, orbs. Now, my feelings on it is that these are from all different places or different things. Maybe some are space travelers from this universe. Perhaps others are entities from another time or another dimension or even another universe. Or we've got a lot of, this universe is big, we've got a lot of aliens visiting us, and they all drive a different vehicle. I don't know what is going on. But what have you been seeing recently as the newer sightings are coming in? Are they a combination of these things, or is they focusing more on the orbs? I know people are seeing huge orbs all over the country. I get reports almost every day in New England and the Atlantic coast, of huge craft-side orbs. What's going on out there, Billy?
Well, that's a good question. I wished I had a 100% answer for you, but on the orbs, the problem with them is that so many people are setting off these dang Chinese lanterns, at parties and weddings and birthdays or whatever. And, they get up in the sky and they look real neat, bright and glowing. I get reports every day that I know were a lantern or balloon, celebratory balloon type thing. Now, but I've always had this kind of a unwritten rule that each case should be examined by its own merits. But you do see patterns a lot. Now, there are orbs, and then there are orbs. Some of them, if you look at videos on YouTube or wherever, are without a question these lanterns. But every once in a while, you see one that just seems to be something else, like a craft. these glowing type things. Of course, some people theorize that some of these small, what we're seeing are like scout ships, maybe, that's coming down and taking readings or whatever, or pictures or stuff like that, when actually there's a mothership hovering somewhere that's 100 times bigger than that. That might explain some of the orbs, but I still think the majority of them can be easily explained by being these lanterns or balloons. Of course, a lot of people, kind of get their kicks by setting off stuff like that and waiting for somebody to report it. It's just kind of a joke, really, but there are orbs that seem to defy explanation and can't be assigned to some conventional craft. Now, the triangles, that's another complete mystery. And I think, right now, there's more orb reports than anything. But triangles are a pretty close second.
Yes, I said the same thing.
And there's a mystery within itself. Either, everybody says, it's a government experimental craft. Okay. Some new military vehicle. Okay. If that's true, the military's got about 5,000 of these flying all over every city in the world. And they've developed a craft that will, fly at a real low speed that really goes against what aircraft can do. They can't stay in the air at those slow speeds. And they make no sound at all. They're silent. And, of course, that happened also back in Phoenix in 97. Not only were the craft seen up in the sky by a number of people that you've seen the videos and pictures of, but there were a lot of other sightings made by just people at home. Family was out, and they see a large triangle, big as a football field, slowly drift over right over their house. And no sound, moving at maybe 10, 15 miles an hour. It took it 5 or 6 minutes to pass over. I do not believe that our government or military is that advanced. I just don't believe it. Now, I don't know where they're all coming from, but there's no... And why would they send an experimental craft right over a city or something like that? With some chance of it maybe crashing. They usually don't do that. Those things like that are tested in remote locations where they can't be seen by people. And they're, out in the desert or something like that while they're testing them and, altering them or whatever they need to do to them, making improvements. But the triangle thing, you can't just say, that's a military experimental plane. That's it, That can explain every one of them.
No, that's true. And this summer, all of a sudden, I'm getting a lot of triangles, the big massive ones, like your really huge ones, being seen all over, Connecticut, Massachusetts, right up the New England, all through New England. And they also told me something. I don't know if you're getting this on the triangle reports. I never did before. But they're telling me that the triangles are changing shape, but seem to open up and form this long, straight line and then fold back up or shape back into the triangle. And they have been telling me this for, I'd say, the last 6 months.
Yes, I've seen, there's been a very few of those, but there have been a few, I remember.
And I can't think that we could do that.
No, no, we're light years away from that,
And what about the rectangle ships that are being seen.
Yeah, there's more of those reports than you might think. I bet I've probably got 40 or 50 on the site. That is hard to explain because it's just not any way that a square or rectangle could be aerodynamic. I understand that the triangles would be,
Yeah.
because of wind resistance. But there have been people that have very clearly seen a large rectangle ships, big as a house or bigger. Some of them in broad daylight, and they come through and off they go into the sky, and nobody knows what they are. That's bizarre to me.
That is bizarre to me too, and the fact that they're huge. I've been told that they are the size of a skyscraper building. They'd be like 20 stories high. And I cannot get over how they manipulate them, and they're quiet, and they will go at great speeds and then hover. How do you hover a building like that,
Well, as far as our technology goes, you can't.
Well, don't forget, we look at everything with human thinking, human knowledge, human physics, and human science, and we don't understand their science, their physics, which obviously is different than ours. That's why I don't have a problem with them. I can think that they are able to do things in space that we can't even wrap our heads around. I don't think they travel within the parameters that we do. They don't care about light years or that kind of distances. I don't think that that's the way they either bend space or do something with time, or they can travel faster than light that we can't even grab that concept. And it's obviously not a problem for them. But what we have to say, well, wow, that's amazing they can do that. But they're doing it, they're taking a building-size craft, like flying one of the skyscrapers out of New York City, to Mars, and then hovering it before it landed. So it's fascinating. So you think that that's a popular thing that's being seen now more than before?
The orbs are more. There are more reports of orbs than anything.
Yeah.
But triangles are a pretty close second, I would say. And you still see cigars and discs from time to time.
Yes.
Too.
Yes.
Now this morphing type thing where they change shape in the air. Now that's something that I don't even think we've thought about that yet. That's so far advanced. And that gives you an idea of where they're coming from is not here. There's just no way that if something like that, if we were capable of doing that, we'd be using that in wars and military operations and things like that. It's just like when we went into Iraq. Whether you think that was a good idea or not, it doesn't matter. I'm just referring to what we used. We put the best equipment that we had over there. And at that time, it was stealth. And that, although to us that seems like, oh, boy, those are great. But compared to the flight characteristics of what's being reported today, they're centuries behind what's being reported.
Yeah, absolutely. And the orbs are very interesting, and I agree. I went to a wedding where they set off about, 300 of those lanterns off of a beach. Mm-hmm. And definitely I saw that could have, so I wrote a whole piece about that yes, they can be reported as. But then I also went to a party where they had the Chinese lanterns in the shape of a UFO, and they were setting them off, and that caused a big deal. However, the size of them is just, they can only go so big, and they have a mechanical movement to them, or their movement is such that once you see them, you can recognize them. I also know that the orbs that have been reported on Long Island for the last year are the size of between a airplane, school bus, or the smallest one was an SUV. So that's not a lantern. They're enormous.
No.
And I did not believe it, Billy, until I saw one. And I saw it with my entire family. And it happened to us right after Sandy. And when Sandy hit, we weren't looking for UFO to care. I wanted gasoline, food, and some water, you know. And we were at, finally one of our supermarkets opened up, and everybody in the supermarket parking lot that was paying attention, and my entire family, 2 carloads of family members, saw this thing. There was 3 of them. There was 2 red ones and a huge white one, and they were enormous. They were the size of airplanes, and they were low, they were silent, they were the most incredible things I ever saw, and they scared me to death because I've seen everything. I've seen solid crafts. I saw it where it was opaque, it was in front of me, you could touch it, you could see it, but this thing, I've never seen anything like it, and it was terrifying. So I don't know. I don't know if we should throw them in with. It was almost like it was a living thing instead of being a craft. It could have been biological.
I think it's interesting that you say that. I've never seen the large orbs, what you would consider to be a craft size, but I've seen the smaller ones, mostly in, I will call it a more placid setting, a forest setting, or somewhere out away from things, or where we had people together one night and they kept reappearing. And I've seen them pop up in photographs as well. And the thing about these orbs is they don't move like a Chinese lantern moves. You know, and one of the ways you can tell the Chinese lanterns is if you are observant enough, you can project the air currents and see how the Chinese lanterns will move against prevailing wind currents. But
absolutely.
Orbs don't do that, and they tend to hover, and they tend to move quickly and yet slowly. And they, in my experience, what I've observed was that they are somewhat translucent. They're not solid looking in terms of the light. Is that something that you experience or can confirm as well?
Oh, I thought they looked like a huge, massive, airplane-sized jellyfish in the sky. That's the only way I could say it without the things that hang there. Just the body. It was moving. I guess plasma was the word people used. Moving fluid interior. Although it was solid, I couldn't see through it. It was this moving stuff. And my first. That thing's alive and it's going to kill me. But I'm a coward and I kind of react to everything like that. The neighbor's dog, a big car, anything that I don't understand, haven't seen before. But this thing, to me, I thought it was more biological than material. I think it may come out of or be part of something maybe so big and terrifying I don't want to think about it. And they come down and they survey us or they're looking at us. But this was under intelligent command because it was piloted. It made hard right turns. It sped up and slowed down. It hovered, and then they flew in formation. So there's no doubt about it. It was a controlled, huge object. But I think it could have been alive. And that, to me, I don't know.
Some of those things like that, look at what we've got now that you can control remotely, too, from another ship or the ground or whatever. They may be able to control them with remote means.
Or some kind of living drone. where, like you said, they go out and they watch us, and maybe they. I don't know why they're not more material, like solid craft, and why people that see them say, and you get that feeling as a human being that this is some kind of more animal than
yeah. I've heard other people say that. I have.
The most frightening.
What they say.
The most frightening story I heard was a Volkswagen in New York City, a Volkswagen-sized orb, and they had a picture of it. Another guy in a opposite apartment building, high up skyscraper, saw this thing looking in and spying on an apartment full of people across the way in another building, and he snapped the picture. I saw the picture, and Billy, it was removed from the internet and disappeared from mankind, I'd say within 40 minutes. That was it.
Yeah,
and I never heard about it
sometimes.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the kind of things that really pique your interest. You wonder who took it off, why, and where is it? Can you see it again? Can you find it? And usually you can't.
Have you had experiences with that? Not the, the same thing?
This, I think this goes along kind with what you said about the orbs, but this translucent or transparent type things that's, where you can see stars through them. Yeah, like this report you mentioned from Oregon is, I have that report. I just hadn't got to it yet. We're going to post it tomorrow. But, they could see the shape of the object, yet they could see through it into the, and see whatever was behind it. Blue sky, I think in this case it was.
Right.
Well, now, that's something very unusual to me. And I wouldn't even right now offer a theory on what that is. Could that be alive?
Yeah,
somehow?
That's my feelings too, yeah. I don't know. Randy, what are you thinking?
Well, I was listening to that description and thinking that we're dealing with objects here, and you talked about this in the first hour a bit, Billy, about the fact that we're dealing with things that potentially are extra-dimensional, which means we're talking about other dimensions than the presently understood 3 or 4 dimensions in our own platonic field and time stream. So you have objects that come into our dimensional space, but because nothing in the universe is really solid anyway, they do not materialize fully in the way that we understand materialization.
Yeah, whatever it is made of some type of energy.
Yeah,
it's energy. And there's nothing that says it has to be solid.
Right.
Like metal.
Well, that's what...
Yeah. That's what he's saying. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Or, it's funny, it's like a radio frequency. I'll use it because it's something common. And you would know this in Texas, especially back in the days of AM radio, when you would get on the fringe of a signal, and you would still have the signal, but it would start to fade. And I often think that these sightings, where you have appearances that seem to almost blink in, blink out, or glow, are merely the fringe signals that we're seeing through an interdimensional rift of some kind. I know even for paranormal that's still kind of edgy, but there have been a lot of confirmations of that from people who have reported craft, who have reported seeing apparitions. Our paranormal researchers report this kind of thing on a consistent basis.
Right.
And we're always going to be theorizing, because I guess until we actually have the ability to somehow quantify things, which is a scientific method, we're not going to know.
No. All we can do right now is theorize. It's such an interesting subject, and with so many possibilities. is what makes it so interesting, because it isn't so easily and quickly solved by science.
Didn't NASA just come out a few days ago with a report? I put it up on, I don't know where I put it up on, that nasty Facebook or on my site, I don't even remember, but it was a video of Fox News interviewing NASA about orbs, because they are seeing them around the space station or something we've got up there, satellites or something. And they have all these orbs, and they questioned them, and they said, yeah, well, you know, the orbs are there, and we do not know what they are. You're right. But look, don't worry about it, because we don't think they're going to hurt us, or they're harmful. So, and the guy shrugged his shoulders. You know, that's what we can say. So now you got NASA telling us that this stuff exists, but they don't know what it is.
No,
and
at least they admit that, you know.
Yeah.
Give them credit for that instead of saying, "Oh, it can easily be explained." I think that some of these places like NASA, I mean, even the military, once in a while, we don't know what it was. It's just like Stephenville, you know. They held back information. You know, there was no planes that night, really, even though people saw them fly over. Then later they were confirmed on radar. You know, so you just don't know, you know, the people that you think ought to, you should be able to trust, and that you might go to for an answer, they're not going to give you one, even if they know what it is. But at least sometimes they do admit, well, you know, we just don't know. At least that's an honest answer. You know.
Yep.
They don't know.
They don't know. And at least now, it was the first time I really saw a government, well, a space professional admit to something and just shrug his shoulders. I thought, you know, that's a big step, whether anybody realizes it or not, that he even did that.
Yeah,
what is your feeling about our space program being more or less taken over privately, and Robert Bigelow being really in charge of a lot of what's going to happen with the United States in space now, including the space station?
Really, when you look back to, you know, the moon landings and so forth, those late 60s, and compare that to where we are today, when you consider all the new technological breakthroughs and so forth, and compare that to the progress of the space program, really, it's been a disappointment to me. You know, we don't look. You know how many ships we've lost going to Mars, things, you know, like that. Just, you know, I just don't think we're ready. We're at the point yet where we can just start sending ships to Mars on a routine basis. Frankly, I don't know why they want to go there anyway, for some reasons, you know. Well, sure, it'd be nice if they found some ancient fossil or something like that, and then that opens up a whole new can of worms and questions that there's no answers for. But, you know, look, how many countries now have landed on the moon and orbiting the moon and so forth? Sometimes I wonder really what the great interest is there. Of course, I've seen all the pictures of possible structures and so forth there, and seen the stories of people that, work for NASA, and they got to see certain things that no one else can see up there, so forth. But, I mean, we just, if we sent something up today heading to Mars, I would say it's 50-50 whether it's going to make it or not. And I just think that really in, 43 or 4 years, when you think about it, I don't know if it has to do with financing, budgets and so forth. Really haven't gotten that far in that length of time. You compare a radio or TV back then to today's. Look at how advanced it's become. But yet, really, they haven't advanced that much to me, I don't think. Unless they know something they're not telling us.
That's what I was going to say, unless they know a lot and have done a lot and are not telling us. Do you think there's any kind of living being of any nature, be it alien, dimensional, anything, up on the moon, or do you think not? What is your opinion of that, Billy?
Well, I don't really think there is right now because, well, again, we have to get back to the secrecy part. All these countries, filming and mapping the moon, and if they took a picture of that you knew were buildings or airstrip with craft sitting on there, would they release that to the general public? I don't think they would.
There's pretty strong evidence even that they've been deliberately distorting our atmosphere and dimming the planet to obscure observation from the Earth. And Chris, you and I have talked about how the sun's changed and the skies have changed. Has anybody noticed in their recollection that at one time you were able to see a fair amount of detail with the naked eye of the moon? With a telescope, you could get considerable detail. And now, even with a fairly decent, what we would call amateur telescope, it appears as though there's a lot of obscuring of details because of changes in the atmosphere.
Yeah, I agree with that. Back when I was a kid, my grandpa used to let me use his little, it couldn't have cost $10, little eye telescope. And I remember I could zoom in on the moon and see it with such clarity, but I can't today.
And even Mars was, you could get some detail when Mars came in real close.
Yeah, you could. That's true. Even with an inexpensive piece of equipment.
Well, you have to say, is this natural? Is this where we're going? Is this happening to us because our whole situation in the solar system is changing? Or are things taking place and they're hiding it from us? And if so, what could be so bad that they would have to hide it? I mean, everything that goes on can't be so terrible that they have to hide it from us, nor can we be so stupid that we're unable to handle it. I think at this point in time, people are starting to digest these things and think about them a little bit. But if they constantly hide everything from us, we will always be walking around with our heads stuck in the dark ages.
Well, and it makes you mistrust your own government. It's just like, you see a big story on the internet, British releases UFO files. And there's a few things in there kind of interesting and everything, but I always ask myself, how many files did they not release? Are they telling us that's all of them, really? No, I don't think so. No, they hold back things. I know they do. We're not seeing the whole story and all of the reports. There's photographs and video we've never seen and probably won't ever see.
Randy, what do you think is the deal with the moon? Do you think it's intentional, or do you think it's nature, or do you think it's a bit of both?
You mean the moon itself, the actual...
Yeah, well, when you go outside, you're right. You look up, because I have a telescope, and it's a good one. And I've always been for last year mad at the telescope, because I thought it was not picking up the detail that I saw 25 years ago with my old telescope. Never dawned on me, and it should have, that there was a change in maybe a veil between us now, or an actual nature. And you're absolutely right, and you kind of stunned me here. Yet you caught me off, guard, and knocked me off my chair with that bit of knowledge that it could actually be a real change and not my telescope. I don't know what to
I
think.
think I know that I would say that at least some of that could be attributed to our atmosphere. Some of it.
Yeah, but we've also had if you follow the stories on what's called chemtrails or aerosoling of the environment, and there's strong indications that there are any number of reasons why they're doing the aerosoling, but that it has changed the density of the upper atmosphere. And I tend to believe
that.
Definitely.
tend to believe that most of the things that are perpetrated against us that they, quote, won't talk about, and they will not talk about chemtrails, are part of a veiled agenda to hide other things. Personally, I've come begrudgingly to the conclusion that there's something very unnatural about the moon. The fact that there's a side of it that we never see, the fact that it is so perfectly in our orbit, all of these really strange things about the moon, and then the fact that we really only ever see, quote, 50% of it, and we don't know what's on the other side. And there are videos out there, and I've actually posted this. It's buried now on OffPlanet Radio on the blog. The videos of the press conference with Neil Armstrong after they came back from the moon. These guys clearly were freaked out about something. I mean, we're now 50 some odd years past the moon landing, and you go back and you look at that press conference, and Neil Armstrong is very, very tightly controlled and looks very uncomfortable. Sources that I have who were close to Neil Armstrong have told me he would never talk again about the moon landing ever to anyone. He refused to publicly discuss it.
I'm sure that's true.
Other sources have speculated that once they got out into space, they were not prepared for what they saw out there, and that at that point, the government went into tight lockdown of data and information in order to preserve the status quo and not expose the citizenry to the unreality of their own outer atmosphere, basically, because apparently once you hit escape velocity outside of this planet, it's a very different world than what we imagine it to be or what's been presented to us.
I totally agree with that. You know, Armstrong just almost became a recluse shortly after, his moon landing. He came back and so forth. He hasn't made a handful of but short little speeches or appearances in all these years, when at one time he probably was the most popular man, I guess, in the world.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's like he is living out there with Ted Kaczynski or something. He's just, he's off the map.
And then
that's interesting. And then, of course, everybody's read the theories that the moon is that was put there to keep us in our orbit, so that we could become the planet that we are, that can develop life, and that the whole situation is manipulated. Maybe when they got out there, a lot of things appeared to be manipulated, or they could actually see the truth of the matter of what's going on. You don't know what to think. Maybe it's like a big anthill and all kinds of small, moving, living things doing what they need to do to keep our solar system in line, and I don't know what to think. All I know is we don't know.
Yeah, I guess we're going to, if it's okay with you guys, we're going to stretch the next 15 minutes and we'll complete the course at 2 hours, since we got bumped off and disconnected, if that's okay, or if we need to take a break at this point.
Maybe just a short little one.
Okay. Well, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and duck out here, and Chris and I will just continue.
Finish her up. Finish her up. Okay, listen, guys. It's been great. I really enjoyed it.
Are you ducking out for the evening, Billy?
Oh, I thought you meant just...
No. I was just wondering. We're running.
Did you want to...
We're just going to run another 15 minutes,
yeah.
and then we'll finish up the show because we got bumped off, and so we wound up with a short segment.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I think I'll let y'all do that. I've got to get up at 4
Excellent.
in the morning.
I understood that you had limited time tonight. Our guest tonight, Billy Booth.
Thank y'all.
Thank you
very
so much, Billy. We look forward to having you back again.
Okay, that'll be great.
Good night. God bless you, my friend.
Bye-bye, Billy.
Bye.
That's Billy Booth, UFOCasebook.com, our guest tonight, and he needs to get up very early in the morning, and so we had kind of planned to do a short show tonight, but let's do this. We'll continue here for 15 more minutes, and I know there were some questions on the chat tonight, and I didn't really want to. Sometimes it's difficult to put your questions into the linearity of a conversation, so forgive me for that. Some of the questions that came up on the chat, I was just looking through to see if there was anything here that we wanted to thread through, Chris. Meanwhile, anything you've got going on right now that you want to talk about, Chris?
Well, the main thing that I have going on is just dealing with it happens in the summer. That's the way I get it to me. I can't control the world. But once, and of course, the warm weather comes, people go outside and they start looking around and they start seeing things more. In the winter, we're all huddled inside doing, the winter things. But in my area on the East Coast, as soon as the warm weather hits, I get an enormous amount of reports of, all kinds. Last year, the orb reports were just overwhelming. I couldn't keep up with them. Every single day, somebody was saying, and again, these were the large orbs, not little orbs, not even basketball-size orbs. These were car-size up type orbs all over the New England, Long Island, New York area. This year, the triangles. They're also seeing the orbs, but they're seeing these massive, and they are so big, they frighten the people. Did I lose you, Randy?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. They frighten the people because of their size. Now, if you walk outside, and there's an object the whole length of your street where you live or the farm that you own or something, you become, really concerned. And they are writing to me, and it's always frantic. We saw a massive, ship, and it was a triangle, and then they all are talking about them opening up, or becoming a straight line, or changing shape, and then going back, and I was thinking about that as we were talking about it tonight with Billy. I'm wondering if those huge triangles are actually many different types of parts or objects or something traveling together in a triangle shape, and they hook together, and then when they arrive or want to do things, they release, open up, and become these orbs and other things and go out and scout around or do what they want to do until they form back together and close up and become a tight
formation
and one unit. Like yeah,
it's kind of like what you're just talking about there sounds like the Transformers movies, the popular animation series that my kids grew up watching, and then they made movies of them. But it's not inconceivable because we're dealing with things that we're seeing from the ground that most people don't carry professional grade equipment to be able to do photography at the level where you would have an analysis. We're kind of hamstrung in that respect, and yet the amount of photographic evidence that we have is staggering when you look at just Billy's website and all of these other websites like our friend Ken Pfeiffer that are posting on a regular basis reports from around the world. And yet our own government, and even quite frankly MUFON, really have fallen down on the job on cataloging, following up with this. There's no budget for ufology, for UFO research on any big scale. So we never really get to the bottom of what these things are because we don't have the ability to forensically examine them.
And we can't even follow the trends of what's being seen. Now, I can say last year it was orb crazy, this year it's triangle crazy, but that's only in my area and the people that seek me out and send this stuff to me or tell me because I'm local to them. It has nothing to do with what's going on in your area or on the West Coast or the Midwest or every other place on the face of this earth. We can't, because there is no unification of this data, we can't, and will not until we do that, figure out what's really going on. And that's a shame, because that alone is just going to keep us stagnant and ignorant and never able to compete in space or whatever it is that we're competing with. And we have to realize that we are in this because they are here. And whether we like it or not, eventually we're going to have to deal with this in a clearer, more scientific, knowledge-filled manner. We can't just make believe it's the 800-pound gorilla in the room and we just won't look at it and it'll go away. And that's what we've been doing up to this point, Also, the orbs, when the people see these huge orbs, they all made one comment to me. They don't know each other. They aren't aware that this other person that sent me a report on the same day. They make the same statement to me. We saw this orb. It was watching us. It was looking at me. It was following us. The people all react to it as this thing, these things, are spying on them. We're watching them. We're looking at them. It wasn't that we went outside and spotted this thing, and it was the thing was aware of them. And that's how come they finally noticed it or felt it. And when they looked at it, they felt they were being watched back. And I found that very interesting and a little bit concerning. But, while I'm speaking about this, I want to make a comment because I get emails, Randy gets emails. We are told this by different people. I know I write about UFOs often in a negative manner or in a very proactive to your safety first way because I feel they could be dangerous. But let me say, I don't know what these things are, even though I've dealt with them personally. And I don't know if they are here to harm us, watch us, help us, or just ignore us and we're in their way somehow. I don't know what it's all about. But I do know that the universe and everything that we are came from a system of light and dark, balance, good and evil, black and white. That's the way it is in nature. There's this constant balance going on. So when I think of these things, that balance is always in my mind. There are good and bad to all things. My only issue is, since you don't know what you're dealing with, you always have to be careful. And unfortunately, yes, I do know people who have been harmed. I have been harmed and have had negative situations with these things. And I also know people that have not, that just simply were able to watch something, see it, register it, and walk away completely unharmed and did not have any fear. So with that said, please understand, we do know there's all sides to these issues, but I can only report on my own personal experience or what people are, willing to tell me. And if I don't hear or experience another side of it, I can't report it or write about it or talk about it.
You make a good point. Everything we know about the universe as we know it right now, all things tend towards equilibrium. They move in and out of balance. There's light and darkness. There's positive and negative. There's good and evil. And one of the reasons why we do these shows is because it's an inquiry into the nature of these things. And while I find that most people have a certain opinion, a certain disposition towards what is going on, especially once you get over into contact abduction experiencers, whatever term you're going to use. There is still this need in us to understand what's going on and to understand it from the standpoint of truth and not from our own preconceived notions. So the tending towards balance tends to be something that gives us a way to understand that no, it's not all bad and no, it's not all good. I'm as suspicious of these people who are pushing the galactic councils, the aliens are going to help us get our freedom, as I am the people who I think maybe are coloring the ET abduction experience. So on both sides you have distortion, and yet on both sides you also have a fair amount of truth. You just kind of have to look for it.
Right. Right. And you have to be open to a lot of things, and you have to really, really go about this in your mind as a complete unknown and something that we have very little real strong evidence or science to use to even understand it.
Well, I think science is going to fail us, Chris. I don't think science can withstand the test of multidimensionalism. I think everything that's implicit in the idea of multiverses, multidimensional contact, is going to break down the basic processes of science, because once we get past materialism, we then head into spirituality, and you and I both know that that's really where this is all going, that on one level, whatever you call this, it goes into the spiritual realms as well.
Yes, it does. And it does for what's ever visiting us as well. I mean, just, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Whatever we all are or are for, or why any of this exists in this universe or the universes, it all is connected. And with that said, you have to be open to that, As far as science is concerned, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the main reason, Randy, is because we only think of science on human terms.
Yes, science is a very limited field of inquiry. It's relatively new. I mean, we can go back to Plato and Aristotle and then come forward to get, what was basically the beginnings of what we call modern science. But theology, spirituality, and philosophy are much older schools that appear to embrace some of the same concepts, but they embrace them from the standpoint that not everything can be proved. And I guess as humans we don't like ambiguity, but we also have had to live with it as humans on this planet for as long as we've been here. I think it's a really weird, baffling, exciting, giddy, funny experience when you think about it.
I had the only real argument I ever had with a friend of mine who's a scientist was because he was a real debunker and very skeptical, and everything he would answer with his knowledge of science. He was a physicist and his knowledge was vast. And I would say to him, but that doesn't matter here, because you are answering every question that we are talking about an alien race with human knowledge of science, your human knowledge of science. Their science may be completely different, so different that you can't even wrap your head around it. So while you stay locked in your human knowledge, you are losing the grasp that there's more than you can understand, and that it may work differently. Their physics may be slightly different than what you're figuring out, or so advanced that you're just scratching at the surface, and you just don't have the ability to understand it, and that makes humans angry. The same thing when a human being gives an alien human qualities. That drives me crazy. They're looking to them to have love and kindness and compassion and care for their young. and all these human capacities and human qualities. Well, what about their alien qualities that may seem vile to us, but totally normal and what should be to them? We have to break out of our human mankind thinking and understand we know nothing about what's going on out there. And until we conquer that, we're never going to get there. And it's just like if you're walking down the street and this horrible creature, you never saw anything like it, and it smells and it's snorting God knows what out of its skin, and it's growling at you, and you never saw it before. You're going to walk over and pet it and put your hand in its mouth? Or are you going to be a little careful till you figure out what it is? Well, it's the same thing with all of this stuff. It may be the most loving pet, and you take it home, and you're sorry you lived your life without one so far, or you could touch it and
it'll eat your face.
Solved in a second, right? So, let's get there, people, first, and then figure it out. But stop giving every answer in your skepticism or your acceptance of this in human terms. You can't put your qualities and your nature, your human nature, your humanity into an alien. They're not a human. So you have to accept that, and you have to accept them. And you can't think about science. Our science isn't the answer to anything. We can't get off our own planet. We can't keep our planet alive. We can't feed all the humans. We can't stop killing each other. We are not the ones to go to for answers as big as what's out in space, what's in the rest of the universe.
Well, I'll just say this. The experts who run the power structures of this planet, who have claimed to have the answers, don't have the answers. But as I always say when we close out the show, I think the truth is inside of each of us. And I think once we have eyes to see, our consciousness is changing, our planet's clearly changing, and we do have the ability to begin to understand concepts that have been hidden from us from antiquity. The old books write about things that we consider now to be fables, but what if they're real? What if all of those ancient stories turn out to be shadows of ages past and shadows of ages coming? I mean, it's all totally within our understanding, but at the same time, we've had a lot of the truth of our own existence taken from us, just like we don't know what sits outside of our own planet, and in fact, even on our own planet. It's all a great mystery, and that's why we do what we do. I'm going to wrap it up at this point. I want to say thanks again to Billy Booth for being with us tonight, and again next week. Inside the Real Area 51, The Secret History of Wright-Patterson, Tom Carey and Don Schmidt, and The Secret History of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I'm kind of excited about this show, and hopefully next week we're going to tear it up again. This is OffPlanet Radio Live. I'm Randy Maugans with Chris Hawley. Say goodnight, Chris.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.
This is OffPlanet Radio.